After I became a millionaire, someone left a jewelry box outside my door. It was a Thursday morning in November, and the fog had settled over Beacon Hill like a silk scarf draped across the shoulders of old Boston. I remember because I was standing at my window with my second cup of coffee, watching the gas lamps flicker through the mist, when I heard it. A soft thud against my front door. Not a knock. Not a delivery truck. Just a single, deliberate sound, like someone placing something down with great care and walking away. I didn't rush to the door. I never rush anymore. That's one of the privileges of wealth. Time moves at the pace you allow it to. But there was something about that sound. Something that pulled at a thread deep in my chest, in a place I thought I had sealed off years ago. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Like this video so this story reaches more hearts, and subscribe for the next journeys. When I finally opened the door, the cold November air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of wet leaves and old brick. There, on the limestone step, sat a small velvet box, midnight blue. The kind that holds something precious. The kind I hadn't seen in almost 15 years. My hands were shaking when I picked it up. I told myself it was the cold, but I knew better. I brought it inside and set it on the marble console in my foyer, beneath the antique mirror that had once belonged to my grandmother. I stared at it for what felt like an hour. Maybe it was. Time had become elastic in my life, stretching and contracting according to the weight of the moment. The house was silent, except for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I had bought this brownstone 3 years ago, after my tech consulting firm sold to a larger corporation for an amount that still felt surreal when I said it out loud. 4 stories of original crown molding, herringbone floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city like paintings. It was everything I had dreamed of when I was 25, and sleeping on an air mattress in a studio apartment in Alston, coding until 3 a.m, surviving on ramen and ambition. But standing there in my foyer, looking at that blue velvet box, I felt none of the security that money was supposed to provide. Instead, I felt exposed, seen, as if someone had reached through the walls of my carefully constructed life and touched something I had buried long ago. I didn't open it that morning. I left it there on the console and went about my day. Emails, a conference call with investors, a meeting with my financial advisor about diversifying my portfolio. I moved through the motions with practiced efficiency, the same way I had moved through every day since my wealth became real and not just a number on a spreadsheet. But I couldn't stop thinking about the box, about who had left it, about what it meant that they knew where I lived. That evening, as the sun set behind the State House and cast long shadows through my windows, I finally picked it up again. The velvet was soft under my fingers, worn in places, as if it had been held many times before reaching me. There was no note, no card, no indication of who had left it or why. I opened it slowly, the hinges creaking with age. Inside, nestled against faded ivory satin, was a bracelet. Not just any bracelet. A thin gold chain with a small charm, a lighthouse. Simple, elegant, unmistakable. My breath caught in my throat, because I knew this bracelet. I had seen it before, held it before, on a night when everything was different, and I was someone I barely recognized now. No, I whispered to the empty room. Not after all this time. But there it was, proof that the past never really stays buried, no matter how much money you use to build walls around yourself. And somewhere in this city, someone remembered. Someone knew. Someone had decided, after 15 years of silence, to remind me of the one thing I thought I had left behind forever. The one truth I had never told anyone. Not my business partners, not my friends, not even myself, most days. And now it was sitting in the palm of my hand, cold and undeniable, waiting for me to finally face what I had spent a fortune trying to forget. I placed the bracelet back in its box and locked it in the top drawer of my desk, beneath files and folders I hadn't touched in months. As if hiding it away could undo the fact that it had appeared. As if I could simply return to the life I had constructed, where every surface gleamed and every corner was accounted for. But the next morning, I found myself standing in front of that drawer before I had even made my coffee. My mornings usually followed a strict ritual. I would wake at 6, do 20 minutes of meditation on the yoga mat in my bedroom, then shower in the marble bathroom with its rain shower head and imported Italian tile. I would dress in one of the silk blouses and tailored trousers that filled my walk-in closet, each piece carefully selected, each one saying, "I am successful. I am in control. I am exactly who I appear to be." But that morning, I stood in my robe, barefoot on the cold hardwood, staring at the drawer as if it might open itself and offer me an explanation. Outside, Beacon Hill was waking up. I could hear the morning joggers passing by, their footsteps echoing off the brick sidewalks. A dog barked somewhere down the street. The newspaper delivery truck rumbled past. All the ordinary sounds of a Friday morning in one of Boston's most expensive neighborhoods. Nothing about it felt ordinary anymore. I made myself follow my routine. I went to the gym, the private one in the converted warehouse in the Seaport District, where I paid $2,000 a month for the privilege of never having to wait for equipment. I met my friend Rachel for lunch at a restaurant with white tablecloths and a sommelier who knew my preferences without asking. I answered emails. I reviewed contracts. I did all the things that filled my days with purpose and productivity. But underneath it all, I felt it. That bracelet, sitting in its velvet box, waiting. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine from a bottle that cost more than my first car and sat in the library on the second floor. This was my favorite room in the house, with its built-in shelves filled with leather-bound books and first editions, the fireplace that I paid someone to maintain, the antique Persian rug that I had bought at auction without flinching at the price. I had created a sanctuary here, a place where I could be alone with my success, surrounded by proof that I had made it, that I had become someone who mattered. But as I sat there, the wine untouched, I kept thinking about the lighthouse charm, about the last time I had seen it, dangling from someone else's wrist, catching the light from a campfire on a beach in Maine. That was the summer I was 23, before business school, before the startup, before any of this mattered or existed. The summer I was someone else entirely. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother in Connecticut, asking if I was coming home for Thanksgiving. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "Maybe. We'll let you know." I couldn't tell her about the bracelet. I couldn't tell anyone. Because if I did, I would have to explain where it came from. And if I explained that, I would have to talk about him. About the choice I made. About the person I left behind when I decided to become this version of myself. On Saturday morning, I found another box. It was sitting on the front step again, in exactly the same position as the first one. Same midnight blue velvet. Same careful placement. Same absence of explanation. This time I didn't wait. I brought it inside immediately and opened it at the console, my heart hammering against my ribs. Inside was a small compass. Brass, tarnished with age, no bigger than a silver dollar. The kind you might carry in your pocket on a hike, the kind that belonged to a different era, when people still believed in finding their way without satellites and screens. I turned it over. On the back, engraved in tiny script, were 2 words: "Find home." My hands were shaking again. This time I couldn't blame the cold, because I knew this compass too. I had held it before, on a mountaintop in New Hampshire, when someone had pressed it into my palm and said, "So you'll always find your way back." Back to what? Back to where? Back to whom? I had spent 15 years building a life that required no compass. I knew exactly where I was going. I had arrived. I had succeeded. I lived in a brownstone on Beacon Hill, and my bank account had 7 figures, and I was respected and accomplished and fine. I was fine, wasn't I? I sat down on the stairs, still holding the compass, and for the first time in years, I let myself ask the question I had been avoiding since that first box appeared. What if I had made the wrong choice? What if all of this, the money, the house, the perfectly curated life, was just an elaborate construction designed to help me forget the one thing that had ever felt real? Why now? I whispered to the empty foyer. Why, after all this time? The compass offered no answer. It simply sat in my palm, pointing north, the way it always had, the way it always would, patient and certain and impossible to ignore. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my king-sized bed with its Egyptian cotton sheets and down comforter, staring at the ceiling, watching shadows from the street lamps move across the plaster medallion overhead. The house creaked and settled around me, all its expensive bones shifting in the November cold. At 3 a.m, I got up and went to my desk. I took out both boxes and arranged them side by side under the light of my desk lamp. The bracelet, the compass, 2 small objects that weighed almost nothing and somehow felt heavier than everything else I owned. I tried to tell myself they could be from anyone, that I was reading too much into this, projecting meaning onto random gifts from a secret admirer or a confused delivery service or some elaborate mistake. But I knew better. These weren't random. These were breadcrumbs, reminders, invitations to remember what I had spent 15 years trying to forget. Sunday passed in a fog. I canceled brunch with my book club. Women like me, successful and single, who gathered once a month to discuss novels we barely had time to read while drinking mimosas and pretending we weren't all just a little bit lonely. I told them I had a migraine. It wasn't exactly a lie. My head throbbed with the weight of questions I couldn't answer. I spent the day wandering through my house, touching things. The marble countertops in my kitchen, the crystal chandelier in my dining room, the cashmere throw draped over my living room sofa. Everything I owned felt suddenly foreign, as if I had walked into someone else's life and couldn't figure out how to leave. When had I become this person? When had I traded spontaneity for security, passion for portfolio management, feeling for financial statements? I knew when. I knew exactly when. It was the week after graduation from business school. I had 2 paths in front of me. One led to a corporate job in Boston, the kind with a signing bonus and a 401k and a clear trajectory toward wealth and stability. The other led to Maine, to a fishing village where someone was waiting for me, where we had talked about opening a small business together. Something simple, something meaningful, something that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with building a life. I chose Boston. I chose the signing bonus. I chose the future I could explain to my parents and quantify on a spreadsheet. And I never looked back. Or I told myself I never looked back. I built my company, sold it, bought this house, filled it with beautiful things, and convinced myself that this was what winning looked like. But sometimes late at night I would catch myself wondering, where was he now? Did he ever think about me? Did he ever forgive me for choosing ambition over us? For choosing this over him? On Monday morning, there was a 3rd box. I saw it through the window before I even opened the door. My stomach dropped. Part of me wanted to leave it there, to pretend I hadn't seen it, to call the police and report an obsessed stalker who was leaving mysterious gifts on my doorstep. But I couldn't, because somewhere deep inside, beneath all the layers of success and self-protection I had built, I wanted to know. I needed to know. This box was slightly larger than the others. Same velvet, same midnight blue, same careful placement. Inside was a photograph. Not a printed photo, but a Polaroid, faded and creased, the colors slightly off the way old instant pictures always were. It showed two people sitting on a dock at sunset, their feet dangling over the water, shoulders touching. The girl was laughing, her hair caught in the wind. The boy was looking at her instead of the camera, and even though the photo was old and faded, you could see it in his expression, the way he looked at her as if she was the only real thing in the world. I remembered that dock. I remembered that sunset. I remembered the exact moment this photo was taken. Could still hear the sound of the water lapping against the pilings. Could still feel the warmth of his shoulder against mine. I turned the photo over with trembling hands. On the back, in handwriting I recognized immediately, were 5 words. "You said you'd come back." The photo slipped from my fingers and fluttered to the floor. I braced myself against the console, my breath coming in short gasps. This wasn't just nostalgia anymore. This wasn't just someone reminding me of the past. This was an accusation, a reckoning. You said you'd come back, but I hadn't. I had left that dock, that village, that life, and I had built something else entirely, something impressive and enviable and completely hollow. I picked up the photo and stared at the girl I used to be. She looked so young, so open, so convinced that love was enough, that feelings mattered more than financial security, that happiness was more important than a retirement plan. When had I stopped being her? When had I become someone who measured success in square footage and stock options instead of sunsets and laughter and the way someone's hand felt in mine? "I'm sorry," I whispered to the photograph. To the girl I used to be. To the person who had waited for me, who had believed me when I said I'd come back. But sorry wasn't enough. Sorry didn't change the fact that I had made my choice 15 years ago, and now someone, he, was asking me to face what that choice had cost. And I still had no idea if I was brave enough to do it. By Tuesday, I had convinced myself that I needed to find him, that I needed to confront this, whatever this was, before it consumed me entirely. I couldn't work. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sit in my beautiful house surrounded by my beautiful things without feeling like I was suffocating. I did what any millionaire does when they need answers. I hired someone. A private investigator with an office in Cambridge, the kind of person who finds people for a living, who asks no questions and simply delivers results. I gave him a name, Ethan Michaels. And the last place I knew he had been, Camden, Maine. "How long will this take?" I asked, sitting across from him in an office that smelled like old coffee and ambition. "Depends," he said, taking notes. "People leave trails. Jobs, addresses, social media. If he's still in Maine, I'll have something for you by end of week." I nodded and wrote him a check that would have covered 3 months of rent in my old Alston apartment. He didn't flinch. In his world, desperate people paid whatever it cost to find what they were looking for. Wednesday morning brought a 4th box. This time I opened it on the front step, no longer caring if neighbors saw me, no longer trying to maintain the composed exterior I had perfected over the years. My hands were steady now. I had moved past shock into something else, a kind of resigned determination. Inside was a key. Old-fashioned brass, the kind that opened actual locks instead of electronic systems. Attached to it with a piece of twine was a small tag, the kind you'd find at a hardware store. On it, in that same handwriting, Cabin 7, Cabin 7. My breath caught. I knew exactly what that meant. The summer I was 23, Ethan and I had rented a cabin in Camden for 2 months. It was nothing like this brownstone, just a small wooden structure with a screened porch and a view of Penobscot Bay. No marble, no chandeliers, just pine floors and secondhand furniture and windows that stuck when you tried to open them. We were broke that summer. I was between undergraduate and business school, and he was working as a carpenter, building decks for wealthy summer residents. We ate pasta and canned soup and drank cheap wine on the porch at night, watching the boats in the harbor, talking about everything and nothing, believing we had all the time in the world. Cabin 7. That's where we stayed. That's where I promised him I would come back after business school, that we would make it work, that distance and time wouldn't change what we had. That's where I lied to him, and maybe to myself. I called the investigator. "Cancel the search," I said. "You sure? I've already started." "I'm sure. I know where he is." I hung up before he could ask questions. That evening, my mother called. I almost didn't answer, but guilt won out over avoidance. "Darling, I haven't heard from you about Thanksgiving. Your father and I were hoping—" "Mom," I interrupted. "Do you remember Ethan?" Silence on the other end. Then, carefully, "From that summer in Maine?" "Yes." "Sweetheart, that was 15 years ago. Why are you— Do you remember what you said to me when I told you about him?" Another pause. I could hear her choosing her words, the same way she always did when she sensed dangerous territory. "I said that you had worked too hard to throw away your future on a summer romance, that you had business school waiting, a real career ahead of you, that love was wonderful, but it didn't pay the bills. You said he would hold me back," I continued, my voice flat. "You said I would regret it, that I would wake up at 40 in some small town, wondering what my life could have been. And I was right, wasn't I?" Her voice was gentle but firm. "Look at what you've built. Look at everything you've accomplished. You made the right choice." Did I? The question came out before I could stop it. Did I really? Alexandra. She only used my full name when she was worried. "What's going on?" I looked around my library, at all the proof of my success, at all the evidence that I had made the right decisions and lived the right life and become the right version of myself. "I don't know, Mom," I said quietly. "I honestly don't know anymore." That night I packed a bag, just a small one, the leather weekender I usually took to weekend conferences in New York. I didn't overthink it. I didn't make lists or plan or prepare the way I normally would. I just packed. Jeans, sweaters, the kind of clothes I never wore in Boston, where every outfit was a carefully constructed statement of professional competence. Thursday morning, I called my assistant. "I need you to cancel everything for the next week. Tell them I had a family emergency." "Is everything okay?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "I don't know yet," I said, "but I need to find out." I drove north in the BMW I had bought to celebrate my first million. The highway stretched before me, and with every mile, I felt something shifting inside my chest, a loosening, an unlocking, as if I was driving not just toward Maine, but toward some version of myself I had abandoned on a dock 15 years ago. The trees were bare now, skeletal against the gray November sky. So different from that summer when everything was green and alive and possible. I reached Camden just as the sun was setting. The town looked exactly the same. The harbor with its white sailboats, the brick buildings downtown, the smell of salt water mixing with wood smoke from chimneys. I had avoided this place for 15 years, convinced that if I never came back, I could pretend that summer had never happened, that those promises had never been made. But here I was, and somewhere in this town, Ethan was waiting, leaving boxes on doorsteps, asking me a question I didn't know how to answer. I drove slowly through the familiar streets until I found it. The cluster of rental cabins on the point, the same ones we had stayed in that summer. I parked and sat in my car, staring at cabin 7. The lights were on inside. He was there. After 15 years, after everything I had built and everything I had become, He was right there, 30 feet away, waiting for me to walk through that door. My hand found the key in my pocket. It was warm now, from being held so tightly during the drive. I got out of the car. I stood outside cabin 7 for what felt like an eternity, the key clutched in my hand, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The November wind came off the bay, sharp and cold, cutting through my expensive cashmere coat as if it were paper. Through the window, I could see the warm glow of lamplight. A shadow moved inside, and my breath caught. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times over the years, usually late at night, when the house was too quiet and success felt too much like loneliness. But in those imaginings, I was always confident, composed, ready with explanations that would make everything make sense. Now, standing here, I had nothing. No explanations. No defenses. Just the truth I had been running from for 15 years. I climbed the 3 wooden steps to the porch. They creaked under my weight, the same way they had that summer. I raised my hand to knock, then stopped. The door opened before I could decide. And there he was. Ethan looked older, the way we all do after 15 years. His dark hair had threads of gray at the temples. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But his eyes, those were the same. Warm brown, the color of September earth, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Alex," he said quietly. Just my name. Not a question, not an accusation, just acknowledgement. "You've been leaving boxes on my doorstep," I said, and immediately hated myself for making it sound like an accusation instead of what it was, a plea for understanding. "I have." He stepped back, holding the door open. "Come in, please." I hesitated, then crossed the threshold into the cabin. It smelled like wood smoke and coffee and something else, something that made my chest ache with recognition, like coming home after a very long journey. The cabin was exactly as I remembered it. Same pine walls, same stone fireplace, same windows overlooking the bay. But there were differences too. New furniture, a better kitchen, photographs on the walls that I couldn't quite see in the dim light. "You own this place," I said. Not a question. "I bought it 5 years ago. All of them, actually. The whole property." He moved to the small kitchen, poured 2 mugs of coffee without asking if I wanted any. He remembered. Black, no sugar. "Turns out carpentry pays better than we thought it would back then, especially when you're building custom boats." Boats? Wooden sailboats, traditional designs. They sell to collectors, sailors who want something made by hand instead of manufactured. He handed me the mug, careful not to let our fingers touch. "I kept waiting for you to look me up online, to see what I'd done with my life. But you never did." The coffee was hot and bitter on my tongue. I couldn't meet his eyes. I was afraid to. Why? Because if I looked, if I knew anything about you, I couldn't keep pretending that I'd made the right choice. The words came out in a rush, honest and ugly and true. "I built this perfect life in Boston, this successful, impressive life, and if I let myself think about you, about what we had, the whole thing would collapse." Ethan set his mug down on the counter and leaned against it, studying me. "Do you know what the hardest part was? Not that you left. I understood ambition. I understood wanting more than a small town could offer. The hardest part was that you disappeared. You changed your number. You blocked me on everything. You erased me like I was a mistake you needed to correct. You weren't a mistake." My voice cracked. "Then what was I, Alex? What were we?" I looked around the cabin, at the life he had built here, and felt the full weight of what I had done. "You were everything I was afraid of wanting. Because wanting you meant admitting that maybe there was more than one way to be successful. Maybe there was more than one kind of life worth living. And I couldn't let myself believe that. My parents, my professors, everyone told me that people like you, people who chose passion over security, were naive. That love didn't pay the mortgage, that I would regret it. And do you? He asked quietly. Regret it? I looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw not just who he had been, but who he had become. A man who had built a business doing what he loved, who owned property, who had made a life that was different from mine, but no less valuable, no less real. I regret how I did it, I said finally. I regret disappearing. I regret not being brave enough to stay in touch, to see if we could make it work long distance, to give us a chance instead of just running. Why did you come here tonight? The question was gentle, not accusatory. Because you left me breadcrumbs, the bracelet, the compass, the photograph. Because you reminded me of who I used to be, before I became so focused on proving everyone right that I forgot to ask if I was happy. Ethan walked to the window, looking out at the darkening bay. I didn't leave those boxes to punish you, Alex, or to make you feel guilty. I left them because... He paused, his shoulders rising and falling with a deep breath. Because I saw your name in the business section of the Globe. Your company sold. You're a millionaire now. And I thought, she did it. She got everything she wanted. And I was happy for you, truly. But I also thought, does she even remember? Does she ever think about that summer? About what we promised each other? Every day, I whispered. I think about it every single day. He turned back to face me. Then why didn't you come back before now? And there it was, the question beneath all the other questions. The truth I had been avoiding since the moment I saw that first velvet box. Because I was ashamed, I said, my voice breaking. Because I was afraid you'd moved on, found someone else, built a life that had no room for the girl who broke your heart. Because I convinced myself that I didn't deserve a second chance. Because it was easier to be successful and alone than to risk finding out that I'd thrown away the one thing that actually mattered. The cabin fell silent, except for the wind outside and the soft crackle of the fire. Ethan crossed the room and stood in front of me, close enough that I could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes, the ones I used to trace with my fingertip when we lay on that dock watching the stars. There's something you need to know, he said softly. Something I haven't told you yet. My heart stopped. This was it. The final revelation. The reason he had brought me here. What? I breathed, but he shook his head. Not yet. First, you need to see something. Ethan walked to the far wall of the cabin, where several framed photographs hung in a careful arrangement. He gestured for me to come closer, and I did, my legs unsteady beneath me. The first photograph showed a wooden sailboat, sleek and beautiful, with classic lines and honey-colored wood that seemed to glow in the sunlight. Below it was a small plaque. Alexandra, Hull Humber 1, 2018. I stared at it, not understanding. You named a boat after me? Not just any boat. The first boat I ever built completely on my own. My debut design. He pointed to another photo. The same boat from a different angle. Its sails full of wind, cutting through blue water. She's fast, elegant, a little stubborn when the wind shifts, but beautiful when she finds her course. I launched her 7 years ago. My hand went to my mouth. Ethan, there's more. He moved to the next photograph. This one showed the interior of a workshop. High ceilings, enormous windows, wooden ribs of boats in various stages of construction. I named the business after that summer. Cabin 7 Boatworks. Every boat I build has a number, same as this place. Like they're all connected to that time, to what we had. I couldn't speak. My throat was too tight, my chest too full of something I didn't have words for. I didn't do this to make you feel guilty, he said, his voice low and earnest. I did it because that summer changed me. You changed me. You made me believe that I could build something beautiful with my hands, that I didn't have to apologize for choosing a different path. And even after you left, even after the hurt faded, I didn't want to forget that. I didn't want to forget her, the girl who believed in me before I believed in myself. I turned away from the photographs, tears burning my eyes. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to have been remembered like this. Maybe not, he said, and there was no cruelty in it, just honesty. But that's the thing about love, Alex. It doesn't really care about deserving. It just is. And for 15 years, I told myself I was over you, that I'd moved on. I dated other people. I built a life. I was happy or close enough to it that I didn't question it too much. What changed? I asked, still not looking at him. 3 months ago, I was in Boston for a boat show. I was walking through Beacon Hill, and I saw you. He paused. You were coming out of your house with your briefcase, getting into your car, and you looked perfect. Polished, successful. Everything you'd worked for written all over you. And I thought, good for her. She made it. I finally turned to face him. But then I watched you sit in your car for 5 minutes before you drove away, and the look on your face. He shook his head. It was the same look you had the day you left Camden. Like you were trying to convince yourself of something. Like you were working very hard to believe you'd made the right choice. The words hit me like a physical blow because they were true. Every morning, I sat in my car and prepared myself, put on the armor of confidence and competence, reminded myself of all the reasons my life was good, my choices were right, my success was worth it. I followed you online after that, he continued. Not in a creepy way, just I looked you up. Read about your company, your achievements, and I saw that you had everything except the one thing that matters most. You looked lonely, Alex. Even in your success, even surrounded by everything you'd earned, you looked lonely. I am, I whispered. I've been lonely for 15 years. That's when I decided to leave the boxes, because I thought, what if? What if she's ready now? What if she's finally successful enough, secure enough, that she doesn't have to be afraid anymore? What if I could remind her of who she was, and she could see that it's not too late, that we're not too old, and too much time hasn't passed, and maybe, just maybe, there's still a chance. I was crying now, tears streaming down my face, not bothering to wipe them away. A chance for what? He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him, smell the familiar scent of sawdust and soap that I had carried with me like a ghost for 15 years. Come with me, he said. There's one more thing you need to see. He took my hand, the first time we'd touched in 15 years, and led me out the back door of the cabin, onto the small deck that overlooked the bay. The moon was rising over the water, casting a silver path across the waves. Tied to the private dock below was a sailboat. Even in the darkness, I could see it was beautiful, slightly larger than the one in the photograph, with graceful lines and a presence that commanded attention. That's Alexandra too, Ethan said softly. Hull No. 47. I finished her last month. She's beautiful, I managed. She's yours. I turned to him sharply. What? I've been building her for 2 years. Every choice, every detail I thought about you. About the woman you were and the woman you've become. about bringing together the girl who loved sunsets on this dock with the businesswoman who built an empire. She's fast enough to satisfy your ambition, but graceful enough to remember beauty. She's practical but poetic. She's everything I think you are when you're not trying so hard to prove something. My hands were shaking. Ethan, I can't. I'm not asking you to accept her yet, he interrupted gently. I'm asking you to see her, to know that while you were in Boston building your life, I was here building something for you. A way back, if you ever wanted one. A bridge between who you were and who you are. Because I never believed it had to be either or, Alex. I never believed you had to choose between success and happiness, between ambition and love. I looked at the boat, then at him, then back at the boat. The moonlight danced on the water, and I remembered that summer, the way we used to sit on this dock for hours, talking about our dreams, believing that anything was possible if we wanted it badly enough. There's something I still haven't told you, he said quietly. The real reason I brought you here tonight. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. This was it, the final piece. The truth that had been building since that first velvet box appeared on my doorstep. What? I whispered. He took both my hands in his, and his eyes held mine with an intensity that made everything else disappear. The cabin, the bay, the 15 years between us. I never stopped loving you, Alex, and I need to know, before I tell you everything, before I show you what else I've been building all these years, I need to know if there's any chance you still love me too. The question hung in the cold November air between us, and I realized that this was the moment. This was the choice. Not the one I'd made 15 years ago when I chose Boston over Camden, success over love, certainty over possibility. This was the real choice. The one that would determine not what kind of life I would build, but what kind of person I would be. And finally, after 15 years of running, I was ready to answer. Yes, I said, the word breaking free like something that had been trapped for 15 years. Yes, I still love you. I never stopped. I just convinced myself that loving you was a weakness I couldn't afford. Ethan's eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, they were wet. Then there's something you need to know. Something I've been building toward with every box, every clue, every moment since I saw you in Boston. He led me back inside the cabin, to a room I hadn't noticed before, a small office off the main living area. Inside was a drafting table covered with blueprints, a computer, filing cabinets. The walls were covered with sketches and plans. After I saw you that day, after I decided to try to reach you, I started working on something beyond the boat, he said, pulling out a folder from the desk drawer. I told myself that if you came here, if you were brave enough to face what we'd left unfinished, then I would show you this. He opened the folder and handed it to me. Inside were architectural drawings, plans for a building, something modern and beautiful, with huge windows and clean lines sitting on the waterfront. I studied them, confused, until I saw the label at the bottom, Cabin 7 Design Studio and Gallery. I don't understand, I said. 3 months ago, I had a good business building boats, but it was just me and 2 employees, working out of a rented workshop. After I saw you, something shifted. I started thinking bigger. What if I could create something that combined everything we both loved? Traditional craftsmanship and modern business, art and commerce, the past and the future. He pulled out more papers, business plans, financial projections, letters from investors and galleries. I'm building a design center, he said. A place where traditional boat builders can showcase their work, where craftspeople can learn the old methods, where people who love beautiful things can come to commission custom pieces, but also a business, with an online presence, international clients, a brand that means something. I've secured investors. I have contracts lined up. I've been working on this for 3 months, 16 hours a day, building something that could be big. I stared at the papers, my hands trembling. Why are you showing me this? Because I don't want you to think I'm asking you to give up your life for mine, he said, his voice urgent now. I'm not asking you to become the girl you were at 23, to abandon everything you've built. I'm asking if you want to build something new, together, something that honors both of our paths, both of our choices, everything we've learned in 15 years apart. He pulled out one more document, a partnership agreement, professionally drafted, with 2 signature lines at the bottom. I need a business partner, he said. Someone who understands growth, marketing, scaling a company. Someone who knows how to turn a good idea into an empire. Someone who can help me build something that matters. And I can't think of anyone better than the woman who turned a startup into a $1 million exit. I looked up at him, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. You want me to work with you? I want you to build with me, he corrected. Not for me. With me. Equal partners. Your business expertise and my craftsmanship. Your ambition and my patience. Your drive and my creativity. Everything you are now, Alex. Not who you were before. Because the truth is, I don't want the 23-year-old girl back. I want the woman standing in front of me. The one who fought and struggled and succeeded and learned what matters. The one who's strong enough to admit when she's lost, brave enough to come back, and smart enough to know that success without happiness is just another kind of failure. The papers blurred through my tears. What if I mess it up? What if I hurt you again? What if we build something incredible? He interrupted softly. What if we take everything we've learned, all the wisdom that came from our mistakes, and create something neither of us could have built alone? What if we're better together at 38 than we ever could have been at 23? I looked around the office, at all the evidence of what he'd been planning, what he'd been hoping for. Not just a reconciliation, but a future, a real future, built on who we actually were, not who we'd been. The cabin, I said suddenly. You kept cabin 7. You bought all of them. I did. Because you were waiting. All this time you were waiting. I was living, he corrected gently. Building a life, a business, a future. But yes, somewhere in the back of my mind, I was also waiting. Leaving the door open, just in case you ever found your way back. Just in case you ever realized that home isn't about choosing between success and love. It's about finding the courage to want both. I set the folder down on the desk and took his face in my hands, looking at the man he had become, strong and patient and visionary enough to see what we could be together. I'm terrified, I whispered. Good, he said, smiling. So am I. But I'd rather be terrified together than safe and lonely apart. I kissed him then, and it was nothing like that summer 15 years ago. Tentative and exploratory and full of youthful certainty. This kiss was deeper, sadder, wiser. It tasted like regret and hope and second chances. It tasted like coming home after a very long journey and finding that home had been waiting, had been growing, had been preparing for your return all along. When we pulled apart, I picked up the partnership agreement and looked at the signature lines. I'll need to talk to my lawyer, I said, and he laughed. Of course you will. You're a businesswoman. And I'll need to see detailed financials, market analysis, competitive landscape. I have all of that, he said, grinning. I learned a few things about business over the years, too. And I'm not giving up my house in Boston, not yet. We'll need to figure out logistics, splitting time. Alex, he said gently, taking my hand. I'm not asking you to give up anything. I'm asking you to add something, to expand instead of replace, to build towards something instead of running away. I nodded, tears streaming down my face again, but this time they felt different, lighter, like relief instead of regret. "Okay," I said. "Okay, yes. Let's build something together." 6 months later, I stood on the dock behind Cabin 7, watching the sunset over Penobscot Bay. The Alexandra II rocked gently at her mooring, her brass fittings catching the golden light. Behind me, the sound of construction echoed across the property. The design center was taking shape, right on schedule, exactly as we'd planned. My life looked different now. I still had the brownstone in Boston, but I spent 3 weeks out of every month in Camden. I had sold most of my belongings. The things that had felt so important turned out to be just things after all. I kept what mattered: my grandmother's mirror, a few pieces of art, the files from my first company. Everything else, I let go. The design center would open in the fall. We had orders for 12 custom boats, commissions from 3 galleries, and a waiting list of apprentices who wanted to learn traditional methods. The business plan was solid. The projections were good. My mother had been skeptical at first, but when I showed her the numbers, even she had to admit it was impressive. But more than impressive, it was mine. Ours. Built on truth instead of fear, on partnership instead of isolation, on the belief that success means nothing if you're not sharing it with someone who matters. Ethan came out of the cabin and crossed the dock to stand beside me, his arm sliding around my waist with the easy familiarity of months together, but also the appreciation of years apart. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About the girl who left this dock 15 years ago," I said. About how certain she was that she had to choose. How convinced she was that wanting both was greedy, or naive, or impossible. And now? I leaned into him, breathing in the salt air and sawdust, feeling the solid warmth of his presence beside me. Now I think she was wrong. I think the bravest thing we can do is refuse to choose between the parts of ourselves that society says can't coexist. To insist on having both ambition and love, both success and connection, both money and meaning. "That's very wise," he said, kissing the top of my head. "I learned it from someone," I said. "Someone who was patient enough to wait, and brave enough to ask me to come back, and visionary enough to show me that coming back didn't mean going backward." After I became a millionaire, someone left a jewelry box outside my door, and then another, and another. Each one was a breadcrumb leading me back to the one truth I'd spent 15 years trying to escape. That wealth without love is just expensive loneliness. That success without partnership is just a well-decorated prison. And that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you took the wrong path and find the courage to choose again. I didn't give up my millions. I didn't abandon my ambition. I didn't become someone smaller or less capable. I just finally became whole. If this story touched you, leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and subscribe for the next journey. Sometimes the most valuable thing we find isn't what we've been chasing, it's what we've been running from.